And in studio on a completely different subject, we have Hal Shurtleff, who has been with us before. Hal actually came and talked to us about Constitution Camp.
Camp Constitution,
yes.
That's right.
And really delving into our founding documents, understanding it, making sure that we as citizens are well aware of what it is that that our government is supposed to do. It dawned on me this morning. I love this analogy that what we really have right now is our government is acting like a 2-year-old spoiled child that wants to have their way, or maybe it's a teenager that keeps coming back and saying, if you won't do it my way, then I'll go around your rules and I'll figure out another way to do it, rather than have the limits that was set upon by a parent that would be sitting down and saying, this is the way it's supposed to be because that's the way it was designed.
Well, the notion of a lot of people see the government as the parent and we are the children and we have to yield to whatever those government officials tell us, and the opposite is the truth, that we, the people, are the ones that employ these folks, whether it be in Nashua or be in Concord, New Hampshire or Washington, D.C. And we sort of lost that concept. We expect, so many people expect entitlements. The government would do all these wonderful things for us. But when they do things for you, they do things to you, and usually taking your freedoms away.
Well, and the thing I find is that we've forgotten that very, very basic element that Davy Crockett stood on the floor of the House and said, you know, it's not our money to spend.
It's not yours to give, and it's not yours to take.
Right. And so even though we've got a tax system that allows us to pay for what the government's supposed to do, the government really shouldn't be outside of those enumerated powers that are designed in the Constitution. And it's actually we, the people, who are the parents and not the government. And so in reality, we ought to be standing up and saying, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. And we, the people, have to take our responsibilities back instead of, as you say, relying on the government to pay for everything and letting them come along and tell us how dictating to us exactly what should be done.
That's correct.
Yeah. So now we have a subject, and I've heard Mark Levin talk about it. He's written a book about his
yes, it's called the Liberty Amendments.
Right. Yeah, and what he proposes is that we need to have a constitutional convention.
Yes.
To revisit some of the things that have been going on. Now, you have a different idea about this, and you've got different reasons for presenting it. So
yes.
Why don't you give us
a very strong reasons here. Let's explain U.S. Constitution under Article 5. Sometimes you'll see the Roman numeral V when you see it in print. It says there are two ways to amend the U.S. Constitution, and the first one is the one that we've always used ever since it was ratified, where 2/3 of the House and Senate agree to an amendment, and it goes to the states for ratification, 3/4 of the states, and sometimes there's a time frame, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And if 3/4 of the states ratify it, it becomes the part of the Constitution. Now, there's another part of that clause, too. It says that Congress can change the mode of ratification from state legislatures to ratifying committees. They did it one time, to my knowledge, when they wanted to repeal the 18th Amendment, the 21st Amendment, because they knew there were some dry states that probably wouldn't go along with it, so they had ratifying committees and they were able to get it passed. The other way to amend the Constitution has never been used under the U.S. Constitution. It says that 2/3 of the states can apply to Congress for a convention, an Article 5 constitutional convention. There's a lot of confusion, and I think it's deliberate, because people will say, people who support an Article 5 convention will say, oh, we don't support a constitutional convention. It's the same thing. That's what we're talking about here. Article 5. That's what we're not talking about anything else right now.
Right.
Back in '95, though, there was an attempt to have something called the Conference of the States, COS, where they only needed a simple majority, and New Hampshire was one of the first states to say no to this. So what we have here, we have some folk. Now, Mark Levin, in his book, Liberty Amendments, by the way, some of the amendments he proposes are pretty outrageous themselves. I mean, I looked at one of them that I agree with, to repeal the 17th Amendment, which made U.S. senators up to a popular election, where in the past they were chosen by the assemblies, the state legislatures,
right.
which made them accountable to the state government, not to every 6 years, make them super members of Congress.
And it was really because the 17th Amendment was really because there was so much corruption going on within the states in electing their senators and paying their senators that they were trying to get rid of that. Instead, they just moved the corruption all the way to centralized it in the federal level.
Well,
but I think
what happened was that the senators were answerable to the states, and before you had the income tax, that the senators would have to take the bill back, the tax bill back home. So they said no to a lot of House of Representatives spending proposals. They said, we'll never get away with this. We can't take this back home and appeal this to our legislature. We'll lose our jobs. So in order to circumvent that, they say, well, if we made you popularly elected, the state legislators will have very little impact on you.
Right. But so I see that there's corruption on both sides, and I'm not necessarily ready to go and completely turn it back the way it was, because you just, again, shift the corruption. What I think there's a couple proposals that I would put forth, and that would be that you amend the 17th Amendment.
Or repeal it.
Well, no, amend it to say that they would be responsible to be paid by their state legislators, but they could be elected at popular vote if you'd like. I mean, and that way it moves it sort of halfway in between. Now, certainly, I'm a big proponent of finding out what the unintended consequences are and discussing those well before we ever take action. But I think that would be one possibility. Another one that was recently proposed to me that I thought was very, very interesting is that the states, instead of when you elect a senator or a congressman, instead of them going down there and finding housing on their own, the states actually own a piece of property that is the housing for each individual member of their congressional delegation. And therefore, it's like a little mini embassy, like we have embassies all around the world in different countries. This would be, in essence, a state-owned location, and they would be required to live there. And so, because the state would then own that, then they would be beholden to come back periodically and hold their town meetings or be more accountable to the state. Unlike we have, Kelly A. on the one hand, who comes into the state during this last week, had 6 town hall meetings, and you had Jean Shaheen and Cheryl Shea Porter coming in, but if they had one, it was well vetted, and only certain people get to attend and only certain people get to ask questions, or they don't have them at all. It would make it more that they would be required to do something because somebody else is holding the purse strings, in essence. So anyway, that's just a little aside. I'm not sure we want to totally repeal the 17th.
Okay. Well, again, whether or not we should repeal it, if we do repeal it, it shouldn't be done through a Article 5 convention.
Right.
So, so 2/3 of the states must apply, and then a convention is convened. Congress must or shall. It's not a question of, well, we don't want it right now. They have to if there's more. So we're talking about 34 states. Now, how is this convention monitored or regulated or managed? Well, there are no laws. 1979, there were hearings. I think the Senate had hearings, and at one time I had the 1,000+ page documents from the hearings. No law was ever passed. So the states would have a lot of leeway in who the delegates would be, and the notion that it can be limited is really a fiction. They don't know that because it's never been done. Now, we had one convention under the Articles of Confederation, and most people know that they were there to amend the Articles, and they decided not only not to amend it, but to rewrite it, and we're kind of glad they did at that time. They also decided to change the ratification from 100%, 13, because Rhode Island never even showed up, to 9. So that's the precedent that's been set. So the states, they may do whatever they choose. So you got a state that says, well, we want a convention for the purpose of a balanced budget amendment, and you get down there, and there's 1,000 different amendments being proposed. And I tell you, there's all kinds of, the Hawaii state legislature passed a resolution calling for an Article 5 convention, one, to make Obamacare constitutional, Well, if you have to have an amendment to make a constitutional, it tells me it isn't right now, right?
Right.
Okay. They want to do away with the Electoral College, which I think is a wonderful system.
Yes.
Because the whole argument about these states with smaller populations would be completely, their views would be subsumed by the bigger state. Even, back in 1787. That's why you have 2 senators for each state, and then the House of Representatives is by population.
Correct.
That was agreed to, and it made sense.
But then the Electoral College was so that the big states who had more congressmen as a result would not have
as much. Right.
It was an equalizing measure.
Now, of course, the states with the most population do have more voters, but they want to change that. Sort of this so-called pure democracy. And there's there's a group called Wolfpack, which is a group on the left that is advocating an amendment to the Constitution to do away with the concept of corporations be considered persons. Now, whether or not that's a good issue, and there's lots of sides to that, a couple of sides to that, you don't need a convention to do this.
Right.
And in Massachusetts, we have 2 live calls, one in the House and Senate, calling for similar proposals. Now, New Hampshire, let me give you a little history lesson here. Back in the 80s, New Hampshire applied for a constitutional convention for a balanced budget amendment. Okay, and by the late 80s, we were 2 states away from a federal convention. And we worked awfully hard. I just got involved, I think, in 1990, but Mr. McNally, by the way, is the veteran con fighter here. And there was one state rep whose name I don't know, he may not still be in office. He was sort of leaning on the side of opposing a convention. And lo and behold, he gets a call from Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan said, well, change your vote. And he did. Simple phone call. So you see there's some powerful forces behind this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people love Ronald Reagan, but he was pushing this con, and he should not have been pushing it. Anyway, New Hampshire passed it, but a number of states started saying no. They started looking into it, examining what the John Birch Society had to offer, what groups like the Eagle Forum had to offer. We got people like, and it's interesting too, because this is not your typical left-right issue. You had people on both sides of the spectrum for it and against it. And back in the 80s, you had Warren Burger, who was a liberal Supreme Court justice, who wrote a strong letter saying there's no way you can control this convention. Mm-hmm. Even, it's interesting, Mark Levin, who's, I don't listen to him very often, but he was talking about the greatest legal mind of his lifetime, he believes, is the late Judge Bork. Wouldn't you know that Bork, in 1990, wrote a letter to a Utah state rep saying that you cannot control a convention. In his opinion, it can't be controlled. So I would defer to the greatest legal mind of our time, Mr. Levin. I think you should do the same. So, in New Hampshire, it's very interesting. After 20 years of attempts, every 2 years we would have a resolution trying to rescind all of New Hampshire's calls, because there's about 4 or 5 calls going back to the 1920s and even before that. And since a call is considered a call regardless of the purpose. I mean, Vermont has a call to have an amendment, an Article 5 convention, to propose an amendment to outlaw bigamy. Well, bigamy was outlawed at the federal level. I'm sure they're going to bring it back at some point. But that call is still considered a live call. So our goal was to get all of the calls rescinded, and we did. I think it was 2008. And the Democrats held the House. We were able to have Republican Liberty types sponsor the bill, and it was passed, and we had all of the old calls rescinded. But before before you could even throw away the old calls, it was at State Rep Jordan Ullery, fresh from a meeting of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, proposed another one, and it went to the House Committee on Veterans and Federal Affairs, and we testified, and we beat it back. We killed it. And then it was introduced again, and we beat it back, and then it was, in 2010, it was HCR 40, and the way it was worded, I mean, you didn't see the Article 5 until the very last paragraph. So it went through, and we were kind of taken by surprise.
Right. And
then we were testifying at the Senate subcommittee hearings. I think it was the same Veterans and Foreign Affairs Committee or something like that. And in the wake of that, they said inexpedient to legislate, which usually means the bill is killed. Oh, this is a resolution, not a bill.
It's unusual that it would go through and be reversed.
Yeah. And they reversed it, and it went through. So now you have a live call, And it says for the purpose, and there's a lot of verbiage. All this verbiage is meaningless.
Right.
The call is what the document. You can quote Thomas Jefferson, quote all these wonderful things here. It doesn't mean anything. But I just come to my attention that there's another call.
Well, this is a call for a con through the
Article 5 convention.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
And this is 2010. This became this became a live call. Actually, I'm sorry, 2012.
And who was the sponsoring?
Well, there was a few, but Jordan Ullery is sort of the key man.
Still the key man.
Yeah. And we tell them, congratulations, all of the if this one called before this next year, all the delegates from New Hampshire will not be liberty-minded people. They'll be like my cousin Steve Shurtleff, my third cousin. Those are the people that will be sent to this convention, right?
And
Thank you, Jordan Ullery.
Yeah, well, and Steve Shurtleff, just to remind our audience, is the legislator who introduced the restriction on our Second Amendment rights.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the mindset that will be representing us in New Hampshire if one is called in the next year or so.
This is, let me, just a minute, this is We Hold These Truths on WSMN 1590, and we're talking with Hal Shurtleff, who is presenting an argument why an Article 5 constitutional convention is not a good idea. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I just got aware of this thanks to the Rochester 912 people.
Yeah, there's a brand new
yes.
call.
Now, you already have a call, so this is totally unnecessary. And it's for a different reason.
Okay.
It has this corporation personhood thing, but this is what Professor Larry Lessig from Harvard is pushing. And he's been busy up here. I think he was at St. Anselm's College not too long ago, along with Buddy Romer, a nice pair there. And he's probably going to be here. There's going to be a hearing held this coming Thursday, would be January 30th? January 30th, right, at 10 o'clock
30th, correct.
in the year 2014. Because I know this is going to be hopefully put on, people might be seeing this 4 or 5 years down the road. And they're going to already, so we're going to show up and say, hey folks, you're wasting your time, you already got a call.
Right.
What you need to do is rescind all of your old calls. And by the way, we're going to have tomorrow, members and friends of the John Birch Society will be meeting at the State House to distribute information. One of the articles that we did from the New American, Levin's Risky Proposal, which I'm showing to the camera so millions of people can see it. Available in PDF format, or you can go to thenewamerican.com to get copies of it. And it examines his book and why his argument is seriously flawed. And we're going to be handing these out. And at 12 o'clock, we'll have a little press conference at the Rotunda in the LOB building there, now LOB. And at noontime, so we'll be talking about this. Hopefully there'll be some legislators that will have an open mind. We do see it's... if you're enamored by a talk show host or a radio personality, and they should be, at least if it's you, of course, but most people should say, look, I may like this guy, but maybe he's wrong or she's wrong sometimes.
Right,
you see?
exactly.
And and most people never even heard of Article 5. I mean, year after year, we would try to get people's attention. Hey, pay attention to this issue, and they were yawning. This was not, it wasn't sexy. We didn't care. It wasn't Obama. It wasn't getting people excited. So it was very hard to get people's attention. Now all of a sudden, everyone's an expert on the Constitution, Article 5. You can control it. How do you know? You just heard about this last August when Mark Levine was on the talk show.
Well, exactly, and that's one of the things that we try to do with this program is to encourage people to go out and look at the various issues and listen to both sides of the argument. Actually, go out and see if you can research, and which is also one of the reasons that. When Diane Gilbert and several other of us decided that we needed to have the National Heritage Center for Constitutional Studies established was because people, especially not in our schools, but also in our colleges and so forth, were not examining the Constitution, didn't read it. It's only 20 pages long, for heaven's sakes.
And the state Constitution.
And didn't study it. Either one of them, and they do go hand in hand, and we need to know what our founding documents are, what they say, and then we should even go so far as to pick up the Federalist Papers and read why some of the discussions that were going back and forth on why the founders decided on the language that they did. So, definitely, and because Mark Levin has written his book, I'm sure that a lot of people have read that and now feel like they're experts on it.
And you can become an expert by reading a book once in a while. This old saying, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? In 2011, in September 2011, there was a forum at Harvard Law School.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Harvard Law School isn't a bastion of libertarianism or limited government advocates.
Not
the
any
opposite.
longer.
Just the opposite.
They started out that way, but they
Well, it hadn't been since
far
probably
away.
the 1880s under Roscoe Pound, when they were evolutionists. Everything evolves, even the Constitution, even law, everything evolved. There's nothing fixed, right? So they held this forum, and I tried to be a panelist because it was billed as both sides will be heard. We're going to sing, and we're going to sing Kumbaya and hold hands, and everything's wonderful. Well, they wouldn't return my call, they wouldn't return my email, but I did get media credential. I shouldn't say I did, but the New American Magazine. So I was there for a day, and a colleague of mine was the day before. And I had a few of my friends that were there as registered attendees to get some information and attend some of the workshops and all, because I can only be at obviously one at a time. And the only person that was allowed to present the anti-convention perspective was Professor Lawrence Tribe, Harvard University law professor, a colleague of Larry Lessig, who hosted. You had to let him in because he's part of the law school. Only one. At this group, there was some very interesting people. There was a lady from one of the organizers of Occupy Wall Street. Because I was in the workshop that she was involved in. She gave me a business card, and a group called Common Cause. Common Cause, we could say, is a far left advocacy group. It was put up by Rockefeller Foundation money back in the early 70s. Then you had Mark Meckler of Tea Party Patriots, which is sort of a beltway, or it's not a local Tea Party group, it's sort of a national type group. And the Goldwater Institute, I think his name is Dick Duranius, hope I'm pronouncing his name right. These were people advocating. And I'm thinking, here you have people on the far left, so-called far right, moderates or what have you, all looking for the same thing. Well, if you're going to go into this convention, whose worldview will dominate? Whose amendments will come out of this, you see? I mean, why would you do that? I'd work with people on the other side of the spectrum to stop one, and we've done that over the years, but to work with them to get one? And I tell, Mark Levin, well, do you think the delegates from New Hampshire, if they're chosen before this next election, if the current situation, do you think they're going to go down there and they're going to pay any attention to what Mark Levin people have to propose? Absolutely not. They'll say, we have no interest in your agenda. We have our own agenda here, and we're going to promote it. But let's look. They make a case, and you could listen to Mark Levin's case, that you have a runaway federal government, you have U.S. congressmen that aren't doing their job, you have an administration that's horrible, you have the Supreme Court that's making bad decisions. That's all true. So what's the solution? Adding more amendments to something they're already ignoring. To me, that's ludicrous. And there's a fellow by the name of Edward Vieira, who I think you know very well, and he wrote an incredible article. He's refuting Timothy Baldwin, the son of Chuck Baldwin, who's actually another big Article 5 guy. And he said, okay, so even if you got amendments out of this that you like, the people that enforce it don't want to enforce it, you see. So, and then you're going to have challenges. So you may wait 20 years before anything comes out of this. And you're spending all of your time, and they have a lot of money they're spending on this issue here. I don't know where it's coming from. Well, I know some of it's coming from. And anyway, so if you do a little search with News with Views and look for Ed Vieira on Article 5, I think the title is Enforce the Constitution, Not Amend It.
Correct. Correct. And which is what we say about a lot of things. If we would just enforce these things,
that's right. If you enforce the Constitution, you wouldn't have this. And if people who are so concerned about runaway government would pay attention to the people they send down to D.C. Now, I don't know who will be at this hearing in a couple of days, but if I get there, which I plan to be, and Larry Lessig is showing up, I said, I tell you what, instead of having an Article 5, may I propose that the Harvard School of Government, the JFK School of Government, and these Ivy League law schools shut operations for about 2 decades, because they're the folks that are running this country. And they have this mindset, this socialist mindset. Maybe if we stop sending these people down to D.C., we'd have a chance to, clean things up a bit. I don't think they're going to go for that too well, though, will they?
Well, you have to stop the money flow. You've got to follow the money to figure out who's whose agendas are going forward and why they are so prevalent in many of our schools. I mean, you know, we have some really good schools out there that are good colleges, but when you look at why the left-leaning in so many of our colleges, we have to go and look who's funding them.
Well, it's interesting too, because the people supporting a con, a lot of, we would call them neoconservative talk show hosts. Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, of course Mark Levine. Now, Glenn Beck does a good job when it comes to exposing Agenda 21. He exposed the Federal Reserve Bank. And he does a lot of information about exposing George Soros, the sugar daddy of the left. Wouldn't you know that George Soros is funding a group called Wolfpack, I mentioned earlier, calling for an Article 5 convention? Then you get people on the left, and they look at the Koch brothers as, you know, the embodiment of pure right-wing hate and evil. Well, guess what, folks, and my left-wing friends? Guess who wanted Article 5? Guess who's backing an article? The Koch brothers are supporting an Article 5 convention too. So you have the left-wing meanies and the right-wing meanies all pushing for an Article 5. So you say, what's going on here? The solution isn't a convention that will not. They say it's out of control. Oh, I think it's going to be very controlled. But I think the agenda is going to be a lot different than what people like.
Well, exactly, and it goes back to the fact that the state of New Hampshire has, while we have the ability and supposedly we're supposed to have a con within the state every so many years. Right. I think it's every 10 years or something like that. We haven't had one since like 1968. And what happened when we did have one in 1968? But they. The ones who understood how to play the system slipped in a little change into our Constitution that has made basically turned our government upside down in many ways.
Now, one of the arguments that the pro-Article 5 people say is that there's no way that 3/4 of the states would ratify any amendments that are off the wall or crazy. Why would they think that? Let's look at the 16th Amendment that was ratified by the first process of Article 5. Yeah. It gave us income tax. What about the 17th Amendment that took powers away from the state legislature? How about the 18th Amendment? Now, I'm not an advocate of drunkenness and all have you, but 18th Amendment was outlawed this manufacture and transportation of alcoholic beverages. You know, that was a pretty...
Yeah, and how did that work for us? We ended up repealing.
That's right, and that still passed, right? Right? Then you have a lot of state governments that are doing crazy things without a con. Look at Agenda 21, and I think we might have discussed this on the show before. You have an entity that was formed at the UN called ICLEI, and it's operating in all 50 states, and under the noses of state legislators. Most of them support it. And then you have something called Common Core, something that the federal government said to all the states, look, Common Core was adopted by the National Council of Governors, National Governors Association, and
which is a private organization, by the way,
and
not elected officials.
And by the way, the National Governors Association supporting a Article 5 convention, and so isn't the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, Mike Ferris, and they oppose Common Core. So you get Common Core supporters and opponents also supporting an Article 5 convention. So here are the states decided. 48 states adopted Common Core sight unseen. Right. Because they were getting tons of federal money.
No, they didn't know. Let's back this up and make sure we get our facts right.
Okay.
On this one in particular, the UN, as part of ICLEI, has been pushing a lot of these things. Agenda 21 is one of them. Common Core is another one. But what they did with Common Core is they said, if you want to apply for the Race to the Top money that was federal dollars, again, out of your back pocket, by the way, not just sent down to Washington paying somebody, and then once they pay the overhead, then they dangle this carrot in front of the different states. And they said, if you want to apply for Race to the Top money, then you must adopt Common Core. So during the summer, before it was completely even written, there was a state officer, not even an elected official, an employee of the state of New Hampshire, accepted Common Core so that we could apply for Race to the Top money, which we did not receive. So now all of the schools think that we have to have it because these are state standards, supposedly. They're not state standards. Sandra Stotsky, who sat on, who was very responsible for helping the state of Massachusetts elevate their English standards, was actually sought after as an expert on Common Core to come help develop it, and she won't sign off on it. She's going around the United States right now talking against it and explaining why it is such a detrimental dumbing down of America. But if you've been around for any time at all, you realize that even back with Charlotte Iserbyt out of Maine, who wrote the book, The Dumbing Down of American Education. Charlotte and Eleanor Campbell and so forth had been working for years to raise the awareness that it was the federal government and the centralization of education that was really going to be dumbing our children down, primarily to push the communist agenda. So it all ties in together. It's just one more piece of the puzzle that they keep trying to advance that pawn forward.
My basic point was that states are doing a lot of bad, crazy things.
Exactly.
They're also redefining marriage, which to me is outrageous. But anyway, so
that's another side story too.
So let me mention a few other recent articles. Atlantic magazine, I think it was December 17th of 2013, had an article, How to Rewrite the Constitution. And they were very much in favor of rewriting the Constitution. And they said Article 5 Convention. And they were saying nobody really pays much attention to our Constitution. It was written for an agrarian society a couple of hundred years ago. Even after World War II, that the various governments around the world weren't looking to us. They were looking to the English Constitution, etc.
Correct.
Well, John Adams, I think, said it very succinctly. He said our Constitution is for a religious and moral people only. It is totally inadequate for anyone else. But I like to think there's enough of us in there that deserve a constitution, the current constitution. The notion that the Constitution is obsolete, well, I'd say when people come up with this is sort of a platitude.
Yes.
You know, and they hear it and they don't challenge it.
So how is it obsolete?
So I tell them, I say, okay, well, let's say I take let's take that agreement on. Let me say that I agree with you. What do we get rid of first? How about the First Amendment? That protects, by the way, it doesn't give you, it protects the fact that we get on the mic here and not worried about being arrested when we walk out the door. Because in some countries you can't do this, right? I try to do this in Cuba and see how long it lasts, right? And I said, what about the Fifth Amendment, due process? What about the Eighth Amendment and cruel and unusual punishment? You want to get rid of all those because they're obsolete? How about the Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizure? So it doesn't matter what year you're in, it was 1787 and 2014, human nature doesn't change much. Because we have technology, the problem is we've so far overstepped the bounds of the Constitution, people have no idea what, it has to be obsolete. But it's not. Just the opposite. In fact, it does provide for technology through a patent office, you see. I think our founders were pretty far-seeing people, but they also knew history. And they knew that man's innate depravity had to be kept in check.
Well, because we're not a Christian nation, according to one elected official, they failed to realize that the majority of the vision and the construction of the Constitution was really based upon biblical principles, and that it is the foundation of this country. And the other thing I think that most people don't remember or want to remember, maybe because they haven't studied it, but that's also that the Declaration of Independence was really a list of 27 biblical violations that the Crown was committing against the people that were living in this country at that time. We weren't the United States yet.
That's right.
So either way, all you have to do, if you want to know why the Constitution was written the way it was, go back and read the Bible and find out what the historical documents there say.
Just a few days ago, I became aware of a conference in Connecticut. University of Connecticut was sponsoring on the Second Amendment. they weren't in favor of it, let's say at the very least.
I'm sure. Yeah, they've been lining up to register all their guns too.
There was a professor from Texas, Peg, I can't think of her last name. She went on in this 3-hour video.
It wasn't Wendy, was it?
No, her name will come to me. But anyway, Pinone or Pinard or something like that. Anyway, she got on there and she said, "I never owned a gun, and she said that she knows how many words are in the Constitution. She knows this and how many words in the Second Amendment. But she said basically the Second Amendment isn't what people think it is. And so she has some wrong premises there to begin with. The Second Amendment didn't give us the right to keep bear arms. We already had that right. But she said that we need to rewrite the Constitution. And she said we need to do this.
Because it's a living document. It breathes.
She said, well, if it breathes, then we don't need to rewrite it, right? But she says we need to use the Article 5 Convention as a way to rewrite the Constitution. And so I actually was able to clip that segment out, made it available on YouTube. And there's a lot of people who are, really the Second Amendment or pro-gun, and we're all, favor of the right to keep their arms, no question about it. I'm hoping that this will wake some of these people up and say, this is the mindset that will most likely control this convention. The people who look at our Constitution as something that's obsolete. And I give you, here's a book I brought in to show people, The Power to Lead, James McGregor Burns. Now, Mr. Burns, the last time I checked, he was still living. He's a professor. He's in his 90s now. He's a professor at Williams College in Massachusetts, and he's sort of a kingmaker. He's not someone who's a household name in most circles, but if you're in the power circles, you know who this guy is. He wrote this book in the mid-'80s, and he said that our founders were too smart for us, because they gave us checks and balances that made it difficult for his worldview here. We have to make right what they put asunder. And he said the way to do it is through an Article 5 convention. You see, so you see, this is why.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is why we need to stop this convention, and believe me, I'm talking about an Article 5 convention. So people will see this and say, "Oh, he's talking about an Article 5." That's all we're talking about here, okay? And what they need to do is they need to be a little informed about it. That's the first step. Getting Mark Levin's book will not give you the information because it's all going to be one-sided. Which is what you expect when you write a book, you're promoting an agenda.
Not to negate Mark Levin and his theories on this, but the other responsibility that we as concerned citizens should have is that we should also pick up the Constitution, read it, pick up the Federalist Papers, find out what the thoughts were behind it, and you can pretty well narrow it down to the Article 5 and see what the arguments are on that particular issue, and pick up a copy of this, The Power to Lead, and read both sides of the argument, and then make your mind up on your own. We have a very intelligent electorate out here who, when they put their mind to finding out both sides of things and really listening and weighing, that they do come up with the right answers, and that's what we here at We Hold These Truths really depend upon, is that people will find out what the issues are, will look at what the documentation is on something, pick up something and further their own education on it, and then make their own decisions, or share what they found with their neighbors and talk about it.
Well, let me recommend a website,
sure.
jbs.org. And if you go to the website, you'll see a drop-down will say Issues, and you'll see Article 5 Convention, and there'll be all kinds of great things, downloads, there's links to videos, from some of our speakers. We have a wonderful video that's about 12 minutes long, the shorter the better, right? It has Oklahoma legislators that successfully rescinded all of their calls a couple of years ago arguing against an Article 5 convention. You can get reprints of this article, and we've got probably about 20 plus articles archived over the years going into talking about guys like James McGregor Burns. We also have what they call a no-con kit that contains a copy of the Judge Bork's letter that's downloadable, you can print it out. The letter from Warren Berger to Phyllis Schlafly saying why a con is a bad idea, can't be controlled, and many other things. And we also have model legislation that we like to see introduced, not legislation, model resolution, I'm sorry, because you don't need a bill to be signed. This is a resolution that the House and Senate in each state passes, so the governor isn't directly involved in this, maybe indirectly, but not directly. And there's a couple of great Facebook pages. One of them is called Stop the Constitutional Convention. That's the one that I'm involved in, that I'm the administrator. And there's another one that JBS has, one called Choose Freedom, Stop the Constitutional Convention. And there you get a lot of updated information, and people from other parts of the country will be, you know, like we just found out Pennsylvania has 11 calls for a constitutional convention. That came up just a few days ago. And all you need is one. I don't know why you need 11, but I guess redundancy is what they're advocating here.
Well, if first you don't succeed, try again. Is that?
But I also want to mention, unrelated, tomorrow night at the Nesmith Library, at 10 o'clock, that's in Windham, New Hampshire, 8 Fellows Road, right off of 111. We're going to be showing a video called Common Core, Dangers and Threats to American Liberty and Education. And it's 2 people from the Freedom Project Education, Dr. Duke Pesta and Mrs. Mary Black. Mary Black has been a teacher for 40+ years, and Dr. Pesta is a teacher, a professor at a college here. And they're also very much involved in opposing this. So it's 70 minutes long, but it's a nice, smooth flowing presentation that goes into all of the unintended consequences of Common Core, the stuff they didn't tell you when they came in and testified.
Right.
So, and that's free admission, so that's tomorrow at 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, that's very helpful to know, because.
And I want to make another little plug and for our Camp Constitution coming up. This is, by the way, not affiliated with any organization, volunteer group, so it's not affiliated with the Jumper Society.
Correct.
But it's coming up in Ringe, New Hampshire, Sunday, July 13th through Sunday, July 20th.
Right.
CampConstitution.net, where you can find that information out.
Right, and people.
And Chris Ann Hall will be one of our speakers. I hope you're familiar with Chris Ann Hall.
No, I am not.
Oh, well, you need to be. She's this wonderful constitutionalist that's been traveling the country, giving very inspirational messages. She's out of Florida. She'd be a great guest for you to have.
Right, right. Well, I'll look into her, but definitely Camp Constitution. I keep hearing about it from people who have attended.
You should do a remote at the camp. Wouldn't that be nice, huh?
That could be fun. But at any rate, you've done some great work there. I hear of people who have attended as well as presented, and they're very, very positive about what was going on there, and explaining really what the Constitution says, what the intended thoughts were by the founding fathers, and what they thought. Right, who influenced them, what they thought, how they discoursed this back and forth, and as Benjamin Franklin said, they gave us a republic, but we the people must keep it. Yeah, if we fall down on our job to be vigilant and keep an eye on what's going on and be informed ourselves, then we eventually will succumb to the loss of those liberties.
One of the things we're teaching them too is not just to have a bunch of facts, which are all well and good, but to defend those facts, to defend your position.
Right.
Because a lot of people, they get this stuff from their parents, and they go to school, and they're going to be challenged, especially in college. And we've seen some people from wonderful backgrounds, you know, you thought, well, they're going to be, and they completely change because they didn't have they knew the facts, but they didn't have the foundation.
Right. Well, and you know, this goes back to what used to be taught in the elementary schools, where you did do things on repetitive rote memory to a certain extent, but we've allowed somebody else's rote memory to come in, and we've not challenged it as a result. And because we've acquiesced in many cases to even memorization of facts like you know, addition facts, those algorithmic facts of mathematics, we have a sense now 2 and 2 can make 5, and 2 and 2 can make 3. It depends on how you feel or what you want to say to them.
Yes, as long as the process is right. One of the Common Core supporters said that, a video clip that we make available. She said, I don't care what the end, as long as the process is right. I said, I'd like to be her accountant.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, Hal, we've really enjoyed having you on today, and I appreciate
having me on.
You're presenting this other side of the story, because we are hearing very daily almost what Mark Levin thinks. And so it's been, we hold these truths, and if you want more information, it's JB as in boy, S.org.
That's correct.
And we thank you for coming on. This has been Karen Testerman with We Hold These Truths on WSMN 1590, Nashua's source for news and talk.